Well, the rapture finally came, and I have to say, it was a lot more peaceful than I was expecting it to be. What's up everyone, Matthew Smart here, and the Super Mario Bros. Movie is finally out in theaters, and considering that Mario is kind of the reason I'm the person I am today, this was a highly anticipated film for me for a lot of different reasons. Some good, some bad, mostly just fear. I was skeptical if this film was going to work from the moment it was first revealed, since Mario is such a simple character with a very simple world that's stretching it out into a full-length film with all sorts of dialogue. That's a very tricky feat. Not to mention the fact that the movie was being made by Illumination, who hasn't exactly made the most artistic films in the world, let's just say that. And then in 2021, when we heard about who was going to be playing all the characters, and I think there was a moment where a lot of boys turned into men. But now the movie is out, and all speculation is thrown out the window, and I have to say, I'm really happy to be a Mario fan. This is going to be a very casual review. I'm not going to go into every little thing in depth, but there is a possibility I might make a Matthew Smart original dissecting the movie a little bit more once it's out on digital, but that might also be tricky considering movie copyright on YouTube. Definitely a slippery slope, but I at least wanted to get my raw thoughts on the movie out there in the public. This review is also going to be spoiler light. I'm not going to go over any of the big surprises that could potentially ruin your experience with the movie. However, I will be going over more general stuff like characterization and pacing and some artistic choices, and will be alluding to some of the big surprises without directly naming them outright. If even that concerns you, then all I will say is that Nintendo and Illumination did a lovely job bringing the Mario universe to light on the big screen, and genuinely made me really happy when I got to the end of the film. If that's all you want to hear, if that's all you need to be convinced, then stop watching this video and go see the film. But if you don't mind me going a little bit more in depth, then let's talk. So by far the biggest concern to me when it was first revealed was the performance of Mario himself, Chris Pratt. To this day, I'm still awestruck by what a bizarre choice that was. And the first trailer that they showed where he's doing his performance didn't exactly convince me that this was going to be great. But after watching the movie, I will say, while I still would have preferred it if Charles Martinet got to voice the character that he has loved and portrayed for so long now, Chris Pratt actually did a pretty decent job. You can still feel his inflection a little bit, but he does play up the accent to the point where it actually feels pretty believable for a more grounded and talky version of the character. It only took a couple minutes for me to no longer see Chris Pratt in a Mario bodysuit, and I just saw Mario. And that's awesome. And thankfully that applies to the rest of the cast too. Luigi, Peach, Toad, Bowser, all their actors portrayed them really well to the point where a lot of the time I felt the actors just disappear and I just saw all these Mario characters, which, given the bizarre casting, I was not expecting at all. Although I will say the one performance that really caught me off guard by how much I enjoyed it was Seth Rogen as Donkey Kong. He brought a very special type of energy to the character that just made him so amusing to watch every time he was on screen. With him and the Cranky Kong performance, if you are a hardcore Donkey Kong fan, you're probably going to be very happy. I will say, as for smaller characters, the one I didn't really like all that much is Luma Lee. He's the cutesy blue Luma that's trapped in the cage. He just kind of spits out very dark one-liners that I just feel are only there for people to post on Twitter and be like, oh, look how relatable this is, as well as a way to just sell merchandise, and it was a little bit distracting. And then for the Shy Guys, I gotta say, I'm very glad that they kept their designs and the voices exactly the same as they are in the games, because surprisingly, even Hollywood knows Shy Guys are without flaw. Another point of criticism I tend to hear thrown around is Peach's characterization, and while I will say, yes, she does handle some situations absolutely flawlessly, she's not Mary Sue. She does make mistakes. Mario is still the one that's necessary to stop the big threat, and Peach doesn't really get in the way of that. She does have a couple moments early on where she talks down to Mario, but you can tell that there is a genuine connection that the two are having as friends, and they get along quite nicely. I will say she does make some silly Illumination-esque faces that I feel like are only there for the sake of screenshotting for memes, but for the most part, I thought Peach was perfectly fine in the movie. Plus, I mean, she's also the ruler of a giant kingdom. You gotta have some bit of self-agency in order to succeed. Another thing I'll say is that I kinda want to see a bit more of Luigi in the movie. After Mario and Luigi get transported out of Brooklyn, Luigi just gets sent to Bowser's kingdom, and he's just there for most of the movie, doesn't really get to do much, and that's kind of a shame since I thought Charlie Day's performance as Luigi is pretty good, and considering that this is the Super Mario Brothers movie, it mainly is just Mario for the most part. It's not a huge deal, but he really only gets his time to shine at the very beginning and the very end of the film. The middle is mainly just Mario stuff. As far as the story is concerned, it's nothing that's gonna blow your mind. Bowser tries to take over the Mushroom Kingdom, and Mario has to save it. But I think what helps is that they know it's a very simple storyline, and they have fun with it. There's no secret ulterior motives or this big life-changing message or anything. It's just a very simple Mario story, which I think was the best approach they could have taken with it. They know that Mario is mainly about action and adventure first and foremost, and thankfully, the action and adventure segments are pretty dang good. You can say whatever you want about the Despicable Me or the Minions movies, but I don't think anyone's gonna argue that Illumination likes to have a ton of fun with its action sequences, and that is the same case in this movie, but upped tenfold. This is one of those cases where a video game movie isn't ashamed to be a video game movie, which is what a lot of adaptations tend to struggle with. Everything just screams Mario front to back, from the platforming stuff to the Mario Kart segment to just the locales in general. It's also just very fast-paced too. The movie's only 90 minutes long, and they keep hitting you with scene after scene left and right, which I know some have said is a negative towards the movie, and while I definitely feel like there could have been another 20 minutes to allow everything to breathe a little bit more, the time they do have, they use very well. Any parts that could potentially get boring are just moved on from very quickly. At the beginning of the movie, Mario's having this little mental crisis because his dad told him that he's not going to live up to anything, and Mario is sad about that, but he decides that's not true and drops it, and they do. They just move on and just get to the fun stuff, which I think is the most important thing for this type of movie. As for the comedy, I will say this movie isn't drop dead funny. I did laugh quite a few times during the movie, especially during one segment with Bowser that I'm not gonna spoil, but if you watch the movie, you basically know what I'm talking about. Although I will say there weren't really any jokes that made me embarrassed to watch the movie. There weren't any fart jokes or anything that dragged on for too long. It was all pretty well paced for the most part. Next, let's talk references. And like I said, this movie made me proud to be a Mario fan, and the references are a big part of that. They celebrate a lot of what makes mainline Mario so appealing, all the way from the very beginning with Donkey Kong and Super Mario Bros., up until references from only 2 years ago. When I was watching this in the theater, I saw a dude who was a few seats left of me pointing at the screen every single time there was a reference that he recognized, which I thought was just adorable. They also aren't in your face either. They'll obviously make you very happy if you recognize it, but if you don't, you aren't going to be completely lost if you don't get it, which is good for outsiders, as you still have to appeal to them and to kids as well. There's also one little thing that I recognized as a very long Nintendo fan that they showed during the credits that genuinely made me teary-eyed. I'm not going to say what it is, but if you've kept up with Nintendo for a long time like I have, you'll probably feel the same way once you see it. And the references also apply to the music as well. There's a ton of remixes, and even a couple of songs ripped straight from Mario games that you get to hear, and they sound lovely, fully orchestrated, and expertly done. And on top of that, the original music that they composed for this is pretty decent too. Nothing that's really gonna stay in your head aside from one big song that I won't spoil, but generally set the vibe correctly. Yes, there are some pop culture songs in the movie, some that you have heard millions of times before, although I will say I am glad we do not have another children's film with Uptown Funk in it. Thank Christ for that! Although I will say, after the initial shock and laughter I had from hearing these songs pop up, they actually were implemented pretty decently. They don't feel like they're there for pure marketing purposes. They aren't shoved in your face, and they don't bring the pace of the film to a screeching halt like in other movies. I know some people will be upset that there's even any licensed music in here at all. I would prefer the movie without it, but the way they handled it, I can stomach it fine. The last thing that I'll say about this movie is this. When I was going into the movie, I went in with a critical mindset and tried to decipher all the right and the wrong from this film. And I definitely do have a couple of small issues with the movie that I've described here. But what I realized more and more, especially as I was getting to the end of the movie, is that it paints a perfect picture of me as a young child who loved Mario so much to never be able to critique anything about the series, hated it when anyone said anything bad about the series, and it all just sort of came back to me by the end of the film, which is something I was never expecting. I know that if I was a little kid watching this movie, I would have loved it front to back, and that part of me is still there inside of me after all this time, even if I fail to realize it. Like I said, this is the type of movie that makes you proud of being a Mario fan. And that's not in an elitist way either. The movie is still very accessible for families and children who aren't even that familiar with Mario. I feel like it's going to introduce a lot of people to the franchise in a way that doesn't feel embarrassing or out of touch by Hollywood executives. This felt like they wanted to tell a genuine story about Mario, and that is amazing. This is easily my favorite video game adaptation of all time, and arguably Illumination's best film as well, which, yeah, I know isn't exactly the highest bar, but considering that this is a video game film we're talking about, that is a miracle in its own right. And considering what they showed during the post-credits that I'm obviously not gonna spoil here, it makes me very, very excited about the potential of a sequel. God, I hope this movie does well. And considering early box office results, it very likely is going to. And honestly, any sort of passion project that manages to strike down on Disney's monopoly on animation automatically gets 2 thumbs up in my book. It's 15 until 6 o'clock, I'm losing sunlight, I gotta wrap this up. If you are a hardcore Mario fan and you have not seen this movie, what are you waiting for? Go and check it out, form an opinion for yourself. I guarantee you'll at least find something to like about this film. If you're only a casual Mario fan or you're not that well versed with the franchise, I'd still say give this movie a shot because I feel like it can appeal to anyone who is willing to give this world a chance, regardless if you catch all the references or not. This movie is accessible to pretty much anyone. That being said, if you do not like the Mario franchise for any reason, whether it be the characters or the worlds or just don't like it period, then just stay away from the movie because it basically is Mario at its core and it's not going to resonate with you. And honestly, if you don't like something as innocent as Mario, then okay. But the door is that way. But that's all I pretty much have to say about it, again, without going into heavy spoilers. Again, there may or may not be a Matthew Smart original about this movie in the future. Depends on if I can make talking about a movie in that kind of way work, but we will see. Good job to Nintendo, Illumination, and Universal for making all this happen. I'm very likely going to see the movie 1 or 2 more times in the theater. I'm definitely going to be picking it up when it comes out on Blu-ray, and I am more excited than ever for what the future has in store. This is the Illumination Chris Pratt Mario movie. How is this possible? We're all just living in a simulation!